People are never who you think they are, especially not in this town of celebrity wannabes and plainclothes cops in Hawaiian shirts trying to seem inconspicuous. In 1971, 2 of them arrested me in a house full of drugs. They look like Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. But holy crap, I got handcuffed and shackled with the dealer and taken to Sybil Brand, the old women's jail. Nobody in jail cares who you are. The question they ask is, what's your rap? Back in 1971, I was 20 years old and looked like a pushover flower child with hair down to my butt. So it was to my advantage that instead of something lame, I could answer felony sales and possession, even though I'd only been in the house for 5 minutes and not even to buy drugs. But nobody in jail was going to mess with me anyway. They'd already had their moment of don't judge a book by its cover reckoning with 3 other hippie inmates who looked exactly like I did. But they'd been convicted of murder and were facing the death sentence. In fact, I'd ridden the elevator to my cell block with those girls and 2 guards. With our long hair and matching jail outfits, the 4 of us might have been repeating mirror images of one another. Except for the cross, the X, in the middle of their foreheads. And the fact that I'd never met Charles Manson. But enough about me. What about you? Are you who people think you are? Are you who you think you are? These days, it seems like everybody's life is based on a true story, and not always their own. I used to call myself a true believer. But when I was a kid, the only thing I had to believe in was what my parents told me. When that fell through, I was forced to become a liar. It happened when I was 14 and discovered soul music. James Brown, Ike and Tina Turner, the wicked Wilson Pickett. And then I made friends with black kids. My all men are equal parents, especially my mother, suddenly got real narrow-minded. The Watts riots didn't help either. She made my dad water down the roof of our house in North Hollywood with a garden hose while yelling it was my fault. After that, as far as I was concerned, my parents were hypocrites. So there was really nothing else for me to do except tell them that my girlfriends and I were going to the library every night, when really we were packing fake IDs and headed to a club in Hollywood to meet boys and dance. Those were the days. Teenage tail feathers shaking, kicking it down the center of the dance floor to Marvin Gaye's Hitchhike, and Junior Walker wailing on the sax, shotgun, shoot 'em boy and run now. Then the lights went down, the DJ started playing Ooh Baby Baby. We paired off in couples, tempting fate, slow dancing in the shadows, whispering our terminal love to one another. Knees and hips touching, belly rubs and bulges, feet barely moving, Shalimar and 16 years old, and the breathy gasp of virginity just under the wire. That is until June 1966. 666. Might as well have been the address for Satan. That's when school lit out and I fell in love with a boy who told me to trust him. And then he disappeared. I spent the summer throwing up while my parents pretended not to hear me gagging in the bathroom. I knew it was just a tumor, but what the heck? Before school started in September, I took the bus to Burbank to see a doctor. I gave him a fake name and a fake address for the bill. In exchange, he said I was pregnant and gave me a bag of prenatal vitamins, which I hid in my room as soon as I got home. Then, I went back to North Hollywood High School in the 11th grade as if summer and nothing had ever happened. A month later, my mother was snooping around in my room and found the pills. "How could you do this to me?" she wailed. "Really? to you? From that moment, nothing that mattered to me would ever matter anymore. And even though I was in trouble for lying, my parents decided to cover things up with an even bigger whopper, telling everybody I'd been accepted into private school back east. In November, they even got fake stationery so I could write fake letters to send in a big envelope to another city so they'd have the fake school's postmark. On Halloween, my parents and I got in my dad's big red Mercury and headed for the Florence Crittenton Home for Unwed Mothers in Lincoln Heights. There, I'd be hidden away for the next 5 months till I gave birth, after which my baby would be taken away and put up for adoption. They told me I had no choice. But the good news was, after that, I could just go home and pretend it never happened. My new residence was safely tucked away in a ragtag Mexican neighborhood that had premiered 6 decades earlier as the pride of Los Angeles. But over the years, it had become like a foreign country to most white people, which made it perfect for hiding their defiled daughters. The home's director, Miss Bates, was a prune-faced old spinster with short, oily hair combed flatly behind her ears. Besides following her stupid rules, she said I'd also have to see a psychologist. It wasn't the first time I'd been told I was crazy. After all, nothing could be more abnormal than to be a hormone-driven teenage girl under the influence of Motown and wanting to be loved. Privacy is our golden rule. Girls may only call one another by first names, and we recommend they make up a special one to use here. Bates extended one lizard-like paw in my direction. What other name would you like to be called? I looked at my parents, then back at her. Ramona, I said. I'd seen it on a billboard over the amphitheater across from the Hollywood Bowl. It was called the Pilgrimage then, and every summer they held a big pageant about some tragic Indian maiden named Ramona. I knew picking an ethnic alias would upset my mother. I watched her squirm and tried not to smile. Just be glad it's not Aretha, I thought. As night approached, my parents and I stood outside on the home's wide cement porch saying goodbye. A pair of swayback Madonnas with basketball bellies trudged up the stairs, pointing at me, giggling as they disappeared inside. Then, 2 pint-sized trick-or-treaters with goblin buckets came by, looked up at the home, and decided to keep going. It was chilly out there. My mother struggled to button my sweater over my too fat front. I knew as soon as they got in the car, she'd start crying. After all, nothing says failure like having to send your kid away for someone else to rehabilitate. But once I settled in, I realized why Bates had suggested the fake name. Since each pregnant teen was there to hide her shameful condition and ultimately be restored to the outside world as if nothing ever happened, there was little to cultivate. Becoming friends would only make the goal of our collective amnesia more difficult. I won't remember I saw you here if you forget that you saw me. In March 1967, after 16 hours of labor, I gave birth. It was a girl. After being allowed to hold my baby once, she was taken away by a social worker. I was told that when she was adopted, all the names on her birth certificate would be changed, including hers, mine, and her disappearing dad's. To protect my future, they said, the real one would be sealed by a court order and locked away forever. When my parents came to get me, I asked my dad to drive us back to the valley by way of Hollywood, which I hadn't seen in 5 months. If he and my mother had known what we were getting into, I'm sure he'd have said no. As we neared Crescent Heights, the Sunset Strip in front of a funky little club called Pandora's Box had been turned into a riot zone with thousands of crazy protesting boys and girls without underwear shouting, "Free love!" My mother screamed and my dad hit the brakes. Who the hell were these kids? Did some kind of revolution happen while I was locked up? And for what did I just get punished? 50 years later, I'm still not sure. You might be thinking I just told you a fake story, or that I wasn't really in Sybil Brown jail with the Manson girls. Then again, maybe you're not who I think you are either. Psycho as all that sounds, one thing is for sure. If I ever meet my daughter, she'll probably feel like I did. Because in the end, no matter who we think we are, mothers always get the blame.